All right, in this video, I'm going to go over how to properly navigate and crush a successful maintenance phase, okay? If you have just finished a fat loss phase, you're coming up to a maintenance phase, and that's why you're watching this video right now. So you've absolutely crushed the fat loss phase. What do you do now? Most people, they're very confused. They're like, dude, I don't want to get fat. I want to keep my results. I want to get jacked. How do I do all of that? I know how to diet. I just did it. I got lean. I lost a bunch of weight. I've successfully slayed that dragon. Now, how do I live my freaking life? Do I just have to eat out of Tupperware and track food all the time? Maybe. Let's go over it, okay? So let's go through two of the biggest misconceptions, first of all, okay? First one is you are maintaining body weight. This is wrong. Most people think this. When they hear maintenance phase, they're like, oh, this means when I lose 50 pounds, I'm 250 pounds, I go down to 200. When I am done my diet, I need to maintain 200. Wrong. Bad idea. And that's couldn't be more wrong. Couldn't be more dangerous, actually. That will set you up for failure long term. And I see it all the time. So maintenance phase. What are we talking about when we talk about a maintenance phase? We're talking about body fat percentage, okay? When we go into a maintenance phase, we are looking to maintain our results up until that point. Up until that point, we've been doing a diet phase. We've been in a fat loss phase. We've been in a calorie deficit. So when we're talking about maintenance, we're talking about maintaining our body fat percentage that we just created, which is now much lower than when we started the fat loss phase. Assuming you were successful with the fat loss phase to begin with, right? So that's the biggest one. We are not trying to maintain body weight. In fact, we want our body weight to go up, okay? Now, it doesn't need to go up through this entire phase, but it does need to go up, and then it should kind of plateau out. That's typically what we see. I can show you I think I'll go to my scale in a bit and show you, because I'm in a maintenance phase right now, and I'll show you kind of what to expect. Everyone's looks a little bit different, but in general, let's say the first 4 to 8 weeks, first 1 to 2 months, starting a maintenance phase after getting out of the calorie deficit, getting out of the fat loss phase. Sorry. When you're going into the maintenance phase, your scale should go up and then it should plateau. Normal. Okay. It's exactly what mine did. Now, second biggest misconception, you need to increase calories slowly. Wrong. Okay. You do not need to do this. This is what people are talking about when they talk about reverse dieting. Now, I use that term, reverse dieting, but I think it's kind of been bastardized. And when I use it, I'm basically talking about the verb of getting into a maintenance phase. So I will reverse a client into the maintenance phase. So what I mean by that is when I'm reverse dieting them, I'm simply just increasing their calories once, maybe twice, once we're into the maintenance phase to see how they respond. Okay. Most people, they will increase their calories slowly. They'll drop to, 1,800 calories, 2,200 calories, whatever it is at the end of their fat loss phase. Cool. Successfully got lean. Now I want to get into the maintenance phase. I will sprinkle in 200 calories, 300 calories. Bad idea. You need to go way heavier. So we'll go over that in a bit. But what you want to do is very simple. Get up to your maintenance calories as fast as possible. Now, I didn't mention this, so I will mention this before we go into this even further. Your maintenance calories, okay? And yeah, I'll go into this a little bit more detail, but again, I don't go into crazy detail. So I will mention this right now. Your maintenance calories are a range. It is not a hard number. So when people are like, "Where's my maintenance?" I don't know, dude. I'll give you a rule of thumb that I like to use. It's very rudimentary and it gives you a starting point. But you just need to be at the range. Okay, that's all that matters. You need to get there's a large range, and you need to get into that range somewhere in there. If you're lower in the range, you'll stay leaner. If you're higher in the end of the range, you may end up gaining a little bit more tissue quicker. Is that tissue going to be muscle or fat? We don't know because we haven't set up the maintenance phase yet. I don't know how you're going to do yours. Anyways, let's get into the next bit here. Okay, so does this work? Oh, there we go. Okay, so biggest mistakes. These kind of go off the misconceptions, but these are some of the biggest mistakes people make in a maintenance phase. Slowly increasing calories, which I just went over. Thinking you need to track everything. Thinking you don't need to track anything at all. The other end. Under eating, which I call pseudo dieting. So you end up like kind of peeking back into like a deficit here and there, but not really. It's a bad idea. Dieting again too soon. So when people start feeling fat at night, this is a classic. You add food back in, so your gut's actually full of food. Normal, healthy. You need to do it. Part of the maintenance phase. But at the end of the day, you're full of food and you had a big dinner. And then you go, I don't feel lean. Well, yeah, you just spent however long in the fat loss phase feeling lean all the time. Now all of a sudden you're eating like a normal person. You go, I think I'm fat. No, you're not. Okay. This is the importance of tracking objective data and making decisions off data and not emotions. Okay. And that's the last part here, is not tracking data. So if you're not tracking data and then you end up falling prey to some of these mistakes, you're in for a rude awakening, and you're probably going to lose a lot of your results, and it's not going to be fun. You're going to be stressed to the max, and that sucks. This shit's supposed to be fun at the end of the day, man. Okay, now, oh my goodness. Where are we? Here we go. So the goals of the maintenance phase. What are the goals of the maintenance phase? It depends on the person, okay? But these are some of the goals that you may select when you move into a maintenance phase. You may choose to gain muscle. Most people should probably choose this. You may want to gain strength. Most people should probably choose this. More flexibility. What I mean by more flexibility isn't physically, although it could be that, but specifically around food. So more food flexibility. And that's kind of leads into the fourth one there too. Eating more in different food, more practice for intuitive eating skills, which you should already have exposure and opportunity for that in your fat loss phase as well. If you're following the MacroIntuitive Protocol, which is what I use with my clients and I use personally as well, or if you use something else, which is totally fine, but you should leave some room for that. But because the diet phase is inherently more structured, more rigid, more aggressive, it's not going to have a ton of that. So you could use a maintenance phase as more opportunity, more practice to just refine your skills of intuitive eating. And you should. I think everyone should probably aim for that as well. Holding the same or similar body fat percentage, that's kind of the main goal of this from a body composition standpoint, to be honest, a maintenance phase, because when we went back to the definition of it, it's what I started with. What is the actual definition of a maintenance phase? Like, we're not trying to maintain body weight, we're trying to maintain similar or same body fat percentage, okay? Increasing metabolic rate. This is a crucial post-diet, because after the diet, when you come to the end, your metabolic rate goes down. Okay, it continues to plummet, and that is what they call metabolic adaptation. That is your body adapting to less and less calories, less and less body weight. So it makes sense that your metabolism actually gets slow, much slower at the end of a diet phase than when you were at the start. Most people would assume it's like, oh, I'm really lean, I must have a high metabolic rate. It's like, your resting metabolic rate is not higher. It's actually much lower than it was when you were heavier. Even if you were fatter or more muscular, it doesn't matter. You're fatter or more muscular, it's more weight, and more weight requires a higher metabolic rate, okay? So that metabolic rate goes down as you lose weight, so you lose muscle or you lose fat. In most situations, we want to lose fat. And so in this case, you're at the end of the diet phase, your metabolic rate is going to be down. We're going to want to get it back up, because that's going to help with sustainability long term, right? Because you're not going to eat perfect all of the time. Nobody's going to, and that would be ridiculous to assume that. We got to live in reality. So great way to do that is to increase our metabolic rate. How do we increase metabolic rate? Move more. And well, that, I guess, resting metabolic rate, best way is going to be increasing muscle, okay? And then we stack on moving more on top of that. Now, the last one, literally anything but dieting. So this is an important goal, because you're not in a diet phase anymore, which gets to my next section here. Okay. But that is key, is like any goal when you're in a fat loss phase, the goal is to get leaner, right? The goal is to get leaner / lose weight, right? We want to lose weight by proxy to measure fat loss, right? But in the maintenance phase, there's so many goals that you could select. Now that you're well nourished, there's a ton of things, right? There could be more performance goals or whatever it may be, right? Okay, so here we go. This is important to understand. There are really only 2 body composition phases in the world, in the realm of body composition, which is what the lens that we are kind of looking through for this. There's really 2 phases. First one is a fat loss phase. That's why you would get into a maintenance phase, because you're done that one. You completed that one, ideally successfully. That means that you are inside a calorie deficit, because you require a calorie deficit to adequately and correctly lose body fat, okay? And then there's non-fat loss phases, okay? So everything kind of falls into that. You could do a strength phase, a hypertrophy phase, a cardiovascular phase, a recomp phase, or whatever. You could argue, I guess, a recomp phase is part of a fat loss phase as well. But I would honestly, only anything that requires a calorie deficit, I just put in a fat loss phase. And then everything that requires, or that doesn't require a calorie deficit, which is like all of this shit over here, and anything else, a laundry list of whatever you want to do, you can make up the rules. Those are that goes in number 2 here, non-fat loss phases, right? So everything falls into either we are losing fat or we are not losing fat, right? And if we're not losing fat, we could be trying to gain muscle or not. You could just be hanging out, right? So anyways, these are the two buckets that they all fall into, okay? Here we go. How do I move around here? Here we go. Okay, so next section here. So fat loss phase, okay? Fat loss phase, this is important to understand. Fat loss phase, how you want to look at it, it's inherently going to be more rigid, more structured, more aggressive, okay? And more strict. Now, that's a scary word for a lot of people, but too bad, okay? That's the deal. And a maintenance phase should be inherently more flexible, okay? I was talking to someone recently in my DMs today, and he's like, dude, I'm feeling guilty because I'm in my maintenance phase, and I'm like, snacking on some things, extra food here and there, blah, blah, whatever. And, he probably didn't really go through the setup, which I'm going to get to in a second, appropriately. And so he doesn't really know what to expect in that regard because maybe he didn't really set appropriate parameters, right, from the get. And he also doesn't know what to expect in regards to what a maintenance phase actually is necessarily. So a maintenance phase should have more room for more flexibility, in my opinion, relative to a fat loss phase. And a fat loss phase, it doesn't mean that it's super rigid, right, or 100% rigid or 100% strict, although it could be. I don't do that, but it totally could be in theory and in practice. But the idea is when you compare the two, fat loss phase more rigid, maintenance phase more flexible. That's the idea, okay? And you're going back and forth between the two kind of forever, right? You may get to a point where you don't need to lose fat really ever again, and then you just hang out in a maintenance phase and then pick one or multiple of these goals or other goals and do that until you die, right? That's totally fine. You shouldn't really have to lose fat forever, really. But yeah, that's the idea. So you're constantly going back and forth between these. Now, I'm going to give you an idea on how to do that and how to plan these out. Whoops. Okay, so let's go through this. So here's one of my dieting rules, okay? This is kind of the big one. You must spend more time outside of a calorie deficit than inside one over any 12-month period, okay? So this is important because it's key when you are planning out your fat loss phases and planning out your breaks, okay? Because really your maintenance phases are just breaks from dieting, okay? Your breaks must be large. They don't always need to be large. Like I have clients do this all the time where they do 12-week fat loss phase and then like a 4 to 6 or 4 to 8 week little diet break, which is essentially a version of a maintenance phase. And then they go back into another 12 to maybe 14-week fat loss phase to finish off their goal. Maybe they need longer, depending on what their goal is. But after that, then we put them into a much longer maintenance phase because up until that point, they would have been dieting for more than they were not dieting. And that goes against my rule here. So looking at a 12-month period for any rolling 12-month period for all of my clients, including myself, we should be aiming to spending more time outside of a calorie deficit than inside one, okay? And the reason for this is there is a cost mentally, psychologically, physiologically, hormonally, biologically, on every level, every system, there are costs associated with being in a calorie deficit, especially if you're doing it effectively, okay? Which we should be. We should be doing this effectively. We should be doing this successfully. And if you are, there's a large cost with being in a calorie deficit. So you can't just hang out in a calorie deficit willy-nilly. It should be focused, aggressive, strict, rigid, very clear parameters. Get in, get the job done, get out, and then move into a maintenance phase. And you should have an idea of what your next 6 to 12 months should look like because then you can plan out fat loss phases and maintenance phases using this rule, okay? Good example for me is I did a 12-week fat loss phase this past December leading up until March. Since March, so I think it was start of March, so March, April, May, June. So for the last 4 months, 16 weeks, I have been in a maintenance phase. Now I'm going to go into another diet phase, a short one, 8 weeks, leading into my birthday in September before I go to Spain. And I'll probably be documenting that on this channel, by the way, as well. So when I get out of that phase in September, sometime mid-September, start of September, I'm going to spend probably minimum 6 months, 24 weeks at minimum in a maintenance phase outside of a calorie deficit, okay? And that is just setting myself up very, very well for achieving whatever goals I choose to in that phase. But also, when I want to go back into a fat loss phase, if and when, I will be very ready and very primed for it, okay? So how do I use this thing? Here we go. Okay, so how do we set up a maintenance phase anyway, right? So let's do this. So number one, set your calories and macros. This is crucial. Now, I have other videos on how to do this, but especially heading into a fat loss phase, assuming you've already been doing that and you have your calories, you have your ending calories, your ending macros at the end of a fat loss phase. What I like to do is add at least 30% to your total calories. So say you're at whatever, 1,000 calories, which you wouldn't be at 1,000 calories. But say you're at 1,000 calories, you would add 30% minimum, which would be 300 calories. Okay. So you'd be at 1,300 calories to start your maintenance. That should put you, why I say at least 30% to your total calories, because that should put you probably at like the low end of your maintenance phase. So many people try and sprinkle these calories in, like misconception I was talking about before, and they end up taking for frickin' ever to get back up there. Your body is craving food in a healthy way. You need to give it that food. Okay. All you're doing is you're just hanging out in a calorie deficit longer than you need to. Okay. So you add a couple hundred calories. I mean, this wasn't a good example, I guess, 1,000 to 300, but say you're at 2,000 calories. So you need to go up to 2,600 calories, right? So if you're going to do that, like you can't just go up to 2,200 or 2,300. That's way too short. It's just going to keep you kind of in this pseudo deficit, and you're going to get all of the negatives of a calorie deficit with none of the positives of eating more. Bad deal, dude. So add 30% minimum, get up to the lowish or mid-range of your maintenance. You'll be somewhere around there, okay? And what you're going to do with those calories, like which macros do I put them to, right? You're going to spread them across mostly carbs and fat. If you had to drop your protein for whatever reason, some people do a little bit for at the end of your fat loss phase, then I would consider adding some to your protein. But if you're already eating around 1 gram per pound of body weight, anywhere close to that, then I would spread the added calories that you're going to increase to your total. I would put them entirely to carbs and fat, to be honest. And then, as I said here, do not reverse slowly. So yeah, add the 30%, get there right away, and then watch over the next 2 to 4 weeks what happens to your body using pictures and scale weight, which I'll get to in a second, and make adjustments there. Maybe make one more adjustment, maybe 2 over the next several months, but there's no sprinkling in. Okay. Number 2, set your level of flexibility, food flexibility. Okay. So this is different for everybody. Using my MacroIntuitive Protocol in a fat loss phase, myself and all my clients, we have 2 free meals per week. Okay, totally off plan. Do not track them. We practice intuitive eating skills and a lot of our habit-based, just habit skills, eating those meals. Okay, and that gives us the opportunity to do that while we're losing fat. And that way we don't actually have to follow a plan 100% of the time either to see elite level results. And you really don't. So that's the way that we do it. 2 free meals. That's kind of our default per week. So when you are done the fat loss phase, say you're following the same protocol I would, and this is the question I had to ask myself, is like, am I going to follow still 2 free meals? Or am I going to do 3? Am I going to do 4? There's no wrong or right answer. There's just what's the right answer for you. And you may have to adjust this. You probably will, to be honest. So it's not about making the right or wrong decision. Just make a decision and then monitor and adjust from there, okay? Here's another example, tracking. So tracking food. Are you going to track every day, or are you going to track maybe just 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Or maybe you track Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday through the week, and then the weekends you don't. There's a million ways you could do this, okay? But you got to figure out what level of flexibility do you want. Now, here's the key. You do want more flexibility than what you did in the fat loss phase, because inherently, compared to each other, relatively speaking, the fat loss phase will be more strict, like I was saying before. So you do need to increase your level of flexibility. It shouldn't just be the same, okay? I would highly recommend adding in a couple snacks per week, or maybe 1 extra free meal or something, okay? Have some parameters. You need to have parameters, but also allow yourself to increase flexibility. That is key, okay? Number 3, set your cardio or step counts. Now, in most cases, because you're at the end of the fat loss phase, this should already be relatively high. So you may drop this a little bit in most cases if it's sustainable and it's not crazy high. A lot of bodybuilders at the end of prep with their cardio, it's insanely high, very unsustainable. So you have to drop that, right? But depending on where yours is at, maybe you're doing 3 runs a week. Maybe your step count is 12,000 steps a day. That's not that crazy. So maybe you just hold that. Maybe you make a slight adjustment downward. I wouldn't necessarily recommend increasing it for most people because it's probably already on the high end, but you're either going to keep it the same or slightly drop it, okay? Here's something to think about here. So higher means you have now more opportunity for more flexibility with your food, and lower cardio/step count means you have less flexibility with your food, okay? Because if you look at it, all this is really doing, aside from like cardiovascular health and whatnot, but from a body composition standpoint, we are increasing calorie output, right? So the higher we keep this and the more consistently high it is, the more margin we have to absorb extra calories. So the more you have, so basically, if you have more room and more margin to absorb extra calories, then that means you could have more extra calories. So then you go back to this level of flexibility. Maybe you increase your flexibility quite a bit. Well, okay, maybe you consider keeping your step count already really high if it is, and you wanted to decrease it. Well, maybe you don't, because you're like, well, I want a donut a couple times a week now. Okay, well, make room for it. Okay. There's these all work kind of symbiotically here, but you want to consider that. Okay, so if you're going to have more free meals, then you probably should make sure your step count's high. Number 4, set your training split and get aggressive with chasing PRs. This one's pretty straightforward. Okay, it's probably going to be a similar training split as you already had, maybe some subtle adjustments, but you should have high training volume, you should have high training intensity, and you should be chasing those PRs. You are now well nourished. You are now not in a deficit. Your body is well fed. You want to take that food and put it to use. Slap on some lean tissue and get to work. Okay. Number 5. These are part of the metrics that we want to be tracking. So number 5, weigh in daily, which you should have already been doing for your fat loss phase. So that doesn't change. Use progress pics weekly. So take 3 progress pics, front, side, and back, just like this. Okay, this is exactly what I do with my clients. This doesn't change at all. You should have already been doing this for your fat loss phase as well. Maybe I do this with some clients as well with progress pics. Maybe because you're not going to see changes necessarily weekly. So maybe take pictures every 2 weeks. That's fine too if you're going to make that adjustment. But other than that, this pretty much stays the same. Compare and monitor and then adjust as needed. Okay, and make sure that you are doing this consistently, because otherwise you're going to rely on emotions, and that is a bad plan. Number 6, set your timeline with a hard deadline to reassess goals. So for example, for me, I know that I am reassessing my goal. I already know right now because I planned it. I'm going into a fat loss phase in 2 to 3 weeks, somewhere around there. Okay. So I guess I'm telling you I have a hard deadline. I don't even have it, but I know it's going to be the first or second week of July. Okay. I just have to figure out the exact weeks until when we are leaving for Spain in September, which I don't know that date yet. But whenever that is, I'm just going to reverse engineer whatever 8 weeks is before that. That's when I'm going to start, okay? Sometime in July. So you want to do that. Ideally, you set your maintenance for 12 weeks minimum. I realize I mentioned before, sometimes if someone has a large weight loss goal, we do a big chunk in the first 12-week fat loss phase or whatever we decide, 12, 16 weeks, something like that. Typically it is. And then you have a mini diet break, so a mini maintenance phase. So that ends up being that could be 8 weeks. So it could be shorter. That's fine. And then you go back into the fat loss phase and you finish the job. Now, after that, you go into a longer maintenance phase, which is 12 weeks minimum or longer. Okay. Typically more is better because you want to spend more time outside of the calorie deficit than you spend inside it. Okay. And number 7, avoid common pitfalls listed prior. So all the stuff I mentioned before, like common mistakes, misconceptions. Okay. Stay the course and stick to the plan despite emotions. Okay. Many people don't do that and then they end up stuck and it's very uncomfortable. Now, this is the thing. You're going to feel fat at night. You're probably going to feel guilty. You're going to go through some of the psychological things here. This is normal during a maintenance phase, okay? It's going to take you up and down. It's actually a lot harder than a fat loss phase in many ways, because in a fat loss phase, okay, you're hungry, you got a lot of cravings, you got to say no all the time, but it's very clear, right, what you have to do. With the maintenance phase, it's actually weirdly harder because, and I experienced this coming out of my last fat loss phase, is I now have more food and I need to eat more food. So then it's easy for me to justify, oh, I'll have an extra snack there. Oh, I'll have an extra bite of this. Oh, I could have this now after dinner. Oh, I could snack on this before dinner. All these things, I had a hard system that I just didn't do any of that during my fat loss phase. Well, now I have so much extra food coming in that's like, well, I need to be well fed. Well, I missed my lunch wasn't as heavy, so I'll have some extra snacks here and there. And then before you know it, you're like, oh, like 25 or 30% of my calories this week weren't tracked. When I actually look at it, damn, okay, well, that could run away on me pretty quick. Before you know it, you're having a sweet treat after every night, and maybe you're not tracking it, right? So that's not a bad thing. That's just something you need to be aware of, and that's okay. But you do need, this is why we want to use objective metrics, because those things can creep on us. And if you're not, before you know it, you could actually be fatter before you feel fat. And you're like, oh my goodness, I gained 12 pounds, 15 pounds, 20 pounds. I didn't even notice it. And if you were weighing in regularly and taking progress pictures and monitoring, you would have caught that. Now, on the flip side, you're going to have more food now, a lot more carbs, a lot more calories in general. You're going to have big dinners. You might even have room to have stuff after dinner, and that's totally fine. It's all tracked, good to go. Now, when 8, 9 p.m. comes along, you might be full and that's fine. And you're sitting there on the couch. You're like, I feel freaking fat, dude, compared to how you felt with a fat loss phase where it's like everything's empty freaking all the time, right? Because you're under eating by definition in a fat loss phase. So now, relatively speaking, you feel fat. So this is a very common one a lot of people feel like, and you don't want to make decisions on that. That's how people get stuck into the weird, like disordered eating stuff, because then they end up, this is what happens. They feel fat one night, then the next morning they fast. And then before you know it, they're doing some weird intermittent fasting thing. They're eating once a day. They're under eating protein. They lose muscle. They look skinny fat. They're kind of deflated. They're under eating carbs. So the gym kind of sucks. They're not hitting their PRs, and their muscles deflate because they're not eating enough carbs. They're under eating protein, so they're actually losing a bit of muscle, and they're getting weaker in the gym, and they don't like how they look. So then they're like, oh, I need to diet, but they're already kind of dieting because you know what I mean. So and then consider they go back dieting and they've barely been in the maintenance long enough. So then you end up just further pushing your metabolic rate lower and lower. And you just end up in this cycle of dieting way too often, which is why it goes back to my rule that I was talking about, right? So, you want to avoid that. Hopefully this helps you avoid that. Okay. So, I was going to show you this quick. So let me show you this guy here. Let me move this over. Okay. So this is this is what my scale looks like. Okay. So check this out. So this is when I started my diet phase. So 185, December 2nd. We'll just do this briefly. I had a bunch of travel here. It's quite messy, but downward trend, got down to 172.4 March 1st. And then here, 172.4. And then here's when I started the maintenance phase. So I reversed right up to 2,800 calories. So I added around 25 to 30%. I think it was around 30% of calories. So I was at 2,800 calories with some more flexibility. I didn't document everything. Okay. And that's by design, right? It is going to happen, and it's healthy to some extent, but I was tracking everything as far as these numbers here. So this started to run away on me. Look, 180 in what is that? 2 months, 8 weeks. And I gained 8 pounds. So like a pound a week, which is relatively quick. So then I'm like, okay, I got to tighten up here. Here I underate way too much. Like, look how much I dropped. I dropped literally back down to here. So this is not what you want, right? This is from me traveling for 12 days in the States, and I did 12 days of zero tracking. Good experience for me. I realized, wow, I undereat protein, and I undereat carbs really bad, and I overeat fat. So guess what? My body looked down here. A lot of people will be like, a lower scale. They associate lower scale with good, right? So they're like, oh man, you must have been so lean here. Not really, actually. I looked way better here. Here, I just look skinny fat and kind of soft, right? Like I still look good, but I was starting to go that route. Now, this is. I'll tell you exactly what happened. I didn't like how I looked when I got home. So most people, when they see that, they go, oh my goodness, I'm doughy, I'm soft, I didn't track for 12 days, I must be too fat. Really what was happening is I was undereating protein, undereating carbs, and probably dehydrated too. So what did I do? I didn't diet. I stayed the course, stayed to plan, even though my emotions could have got the best of me, and I just started tracking all my food. I still had my 2 free meals per week or whatever I had planned in this maintenance diet, and I just started tracking, and I did, and I gained weight, filled out, gained another 6-ish pounds. I hit a big one today for whatever reason. Digestion has been weird, so I don't really read into that too much. But I'm probably actually closer to 178, 180 right now. And I look really good here, way better than I did here, right? My midsection tightened up. It leaned out. My muscles are fuller. And all I had to do was just track my normal calories. By the way, I'm at actually like 3,100 calories. So still more than even what I was here. So I'm lighter body weight, but eating more food. So this is the goal, right? So hopefully this gives you an idea of the kind of mess it can be, but I haven't changed the course here at all, right? So stay in the course. I'll go back into another diet phase. I'll use the scale, but I'll use photos. I'll get super lean again, and then I'll do the exact same thing, drive back up, gain lean tissue, but keep my body fat percentage and maintain it as best I can. Hopefully you like this video. Sorry it was so long, but I wanted to make sure we were detailed and clear. Okay. So if you have any questions on this, if I wasn't clear enough, please let me know. Leave a comment below. I answer all the comments, and also no gatekeeping on my Instagram either. I tell people this all the time. Everything is for free. Okay. I do not gatekeep any advice or any expertise or make a sales pitch on someone just because they come into my DMs. So if you have a question, let me know. My paid clients come first, but outside of that, I'm in my DMs all the time helping people for free with no strings attached. So I want to send you that invitation as well. So if you have any question at all, and maybe it's regarding this or something else in your fitness goals, let me know. I'm happy to help you anytime.